Here are the 12 best thumbnail formats. If you want entertainment, you're in the wrong place. This is purely educational, no retention editing or anything like that. If you're new here, by the way, I've been a graphic designer for over 10 years. I've designed thumbnails for creators with millions of subscribers, and now I teach this stuff online and I break it down with strategy, not tactics. So why does this stuff matter? Well, you'll need to know exactly what format to use for each video, and there's pros and cons to both of them. The next reason is instead of just jumping into Photoshop or Canva, you'll have like actual strategy behind each design. And this will make it feel less, random and messy every time you're designing a thumbnail. And lastly, and this is important, you'll gain instant trust and curiosity from the right viewers. So a lot of these tactics about thumbnail design that you hear online, it's not always very useful because often a lot of those tactics that people throw out, like, use a lot of saturation, use a bright red background, that's going to probably attract a younger target audience. But if you have an older demographic, they're not going to want to click on the video. And let's say they do click on the video, you're probably not going to have a very good average view duration. So you can just ignore those kind of tactics. Now, what happens is if you don't understand these kind of formats and the strategy behind thumbnails, you're just going to waste hours making thumbnails that people never click, which sucks because you're probably putting a lot of effort into making your videos. And then if no one's clicking, that's obviously very discouraging. CTR will stay low even if your content is amazing. This is a really important thing to understand. Even if you make the best content in the world, if no one's clicking on it, then obviously no one knows that it's the best content in the world. You could have such a useful video if you're doing educational content, or such a fun video if you're doing entertainment content, but obviously if no one clicks on your thumbnail, then they'll never know that it's a great video. And the main thing that I really gathered from the comments is that you'll just keep guessing constantly instead of growing your channel with confidence. On this channel, I have my thumbnail roast series where I go through a lot of small creators' channels, but I also talk to a lot of large creators. And a really common thing that the largest creators and people who are just beginning keep running into is just second guessing every single thumbnail because they're hearing these tactics constantly. And the thing that everyone runs into, whether you have 1 subscriber or, 1 million subscribers, is feeling overwhelmed with every thumbnail. So I wanted to give you 12 formats in this video that will hopefully help. One format is if you are the laziest person on earth. Another one is somehow even lazier than the first one. There's one format that almost every single big business channel uses. I don't think I've seen one channel in the finance or business space that doesn't use this one here. There's one format here which will probably have a low CTR, so click-through rate. A lot of people won't click on it. The people who do click on it will stay around for a long time, meaning you'll have a high average view duration. I'll show you a thumbnail trick that was stolen straight from the Twitter feed, and there's a bunch of stuff. So let's go through the first one here. Here's 2 thumbnails here from Kurt, 6.1 million, 1.7 million. Here's one from Fearless and Far, which is a great channel, 17 million, 4.4 million. Then here's another example. This one here, 10 million, 9.7 million. And then this small YouTuber you might have heard of, Casey Neistat, 80 million and 30 million views. Then another example here with 268 million views. That's crazy. And then another example here from this creator who I'm a fan of. If you haven't caught on what it is the screenshot. Now, first I'll go through the cons of the screenshot. Now, the cons for the screenshot is it's the most risky of all of these thumbnail formats because it can look extremely amateur. For this to work, ideally, you have to be doing something super interesting in the thumbnail. But the pros for the screenshot is it's obviously incredibly easy to do. You just take a screenshot. But also you can have an incredibly high average view duration because if we take this thumbnail here as an example, we are going to stick around in the video until we see this exact moment. Because it hasn't been photoshopped or it's not an AI generated thumbnail, we know that this moment here is going to happen. So we're going to stick around for a long time and wait for this exact moment. Or with Casey here, wait for this exact moment. But like I said, you need something very interesting happening in the video. Otherwise, a screenshot's probably going to be quite boring. There are a ton of other examples of talking head videos that go viral with screenshots, but that one is probably the most difficult to pull off because you either have to have something extremely interesting to say, it has to be a video that's maybe extremely vulnerable, something like that. So ideally only use the screenshot format here if you have something very interesting happening in the video. That makes for a compelling screenshot, obviously. Then here's the next one here. We have Beast Philanthropy. We have this one here as well. Simple Actually, 1.3 million, 1 million views with this thumbnail here. Then we have these body transformations here, 7.2 million views, 8.3 million views. This is obviously the before and after. Now, this is an extremely powerful thumbnail format. And the reason is because as humans, we like to watch transformations. That's why we like watching movies. Movies always follow a hero's journey or a story arc, Dan Harmon story circle. There's a bunch of different storytelling frameworks, but the idea is we're watching someone's transformation. So as humans, we find it really interesting watching that journey. So if you look at these examples here, We want to watch the journey. How did he go from this to this? We want to know that journey. We want to understand that. And that's what makes it such a great thumbnail format. Now, the cons of this is you have to have a very good transformation, because if there's not a very compelling before and after, then you're probably not going to get many clicks. If the before and after look identical, then why would I watch? That's not a very compelling story. Now, the way that people get around this, if they don't have a very interesting before and after, is they typically pixelate or blur out the after, because then the after is unknown and we just know the before. So typically what you'll see is if there's a really impressive transformation, they'll show the after. If there's not an interesting transformation, they'll pixel it out or blur it out. But basically, for the before and after thumbnail to work, you do have to have an interesting before and after. The less of a difference there is in the transformation, the less compelling it is. Then we have this next format here. You have day 5, day 7. Here we have day 4. Here we have day 6. 2.4 million views, 2 million views, 1.2 million views. Here's another example. This video here was fantastic. 6.3 million views, and he barely had any subscribers when he posted this. And then 11 million views here with Airrack. If it's not obvious enough, this is the timer. So this involves showing some measurement of time. And typically, the larger the number is, the more interesting it is. But that's only the case for entertainment channels. If you're an educational channel, then you want a small number most of the time. See, if you're making an entertainment video, we want to watch something that's difficult, because in storytelling, it's interesting to watch something that's difficult to do. So in this example here, which went incredibly viral, by the way, he did not have 100,000 subscribers when he posted this. This video blew up because he trained like David Goggins, which by the way is a very difficult workout, and he did that for 100 days. Well, this Airrack video here is 600 days, because in entertainment, we want to watch something difficult. See, if this was I trained like David Goggins for 1 day, that's just not as interesting. Anyone could train like him for 1 day if they wanted to. But for 100 days is an insanely impressive thing to do. So the pro here is if you've done something that's genuinely really impressive and interesting, and you have a large duration of time, that is just inherently compelling to humans. I walked for 12 hours, not that interesting. I walked non-stop for 120 days, very interesting. It's the same idea, it's just someone walking, but if you've done it for a long time, that's interesting. Now, the obvious problem with this thumbnail format is, you have to do something very impressive. Doing something for 1 hour isn't as interesting as doing something difficult for 24 hours, or doing that for a week, or doing that for a month. So the problem here is it does require you doing something genuinely impressive and genuinely difficult. Now, what I've just said is for entertainment. It's actually the opposite for education. See, with entertainment, we want a large number because it's fun to watch a journey. But with education, we're trying to learn something. And if we want to learn something, we want to learn it as quickly as possible. So if I said I can teach you thumbnail design, but it will take 6 months, that's not as interesting as saying become an expert in thumbnail design in 13 minutes. So the pro for using the timer in education is that you don't have to record for that long because you want that number as small as possible. Here's how to get a six-pack in 1 hour. We want to achieve our goal as quickly as possible, so we want the timer for education to be as small as possible. Now, the obvious problem with having a small timer here for education is that you have to find a way of doing something very impressive, so a goal or a desire that we have, in a very short time frame. And that's very difficult, and that takes a lot of skill. So you have to have a skill to present that you have mastered and you can do very, very quickly. So if I'm going to teach you how to write a book, I don't want to write it in 5 years. I want to be able to write it in 30 days. But that requires you knowing how to write a book in 30 days. So for that to work, you have to actually know how to do it in that short time frame. All right, here's the next example. We have Simon Squibb, $0 to $10,000, 0 to 1 million, and 0 to 100 million. All of these thumbnails here look very similar, and you might be catching on to what the trend is. Here's another example from this guy who I'm a fan of, and Mark Tilbury as well. As you can see, we're going from $100 to 1 million, or $0 a month to 180,000 per month. And this thumbnail here is called the 0 to 100. Basically, we're doing a transformation. How do you get from where you are right now to where you want to be? Now, this is pretty much always an educational video. In other words, it's pretty much always a how-to video. Now, there's a very obvious pro here. If you know how to do something, you just have to teach them how to do it by taking them from where they are to where they want to be. Now, the con with this thumbnail format here is you have to understand your target audience, because if you don't understand your target audience and you don't specifically understand where they are currently and you don't specifically understand where they want to be, then your video is going to underperform. I want to show you with the Simon Squibb example here, actually. So here we can see the difference in views. 0 to 10K. That's obviously incredible and that's very impressive and that's, a big goal. However, it's not as interesting as getting from $0 to $1 million. That is a lot more appealing, and a lot more people dream of becoming a millionaire than dream of making $10,000. But then we have 0 to 100 million. You would think that's even more appealing. But the problem with that is it just doesn't sound that realistic. Plus, it doesn't sound realistic that you're going to teach me how to get from 0 to $100 million in 55 minutes. If I were to guess, it should take me a lot longer to learn how to make $100 million. Whereas it does kind of sound plausible to think that I can actually learn how to become a millionaire in 2 hours and 30 minutes. That sounds more plausible. So what we're doing here is trying to find the right balance of being appealing, so having a very desirable end goal, while simultaneously being realistic, because $100 million, that just sounds unrealistic, especially if you're starting at $0. So like I mentioned, one of the cons here is that you have to understand your target audience. Now, one thing I did when I started this channel was actually create a Google form where I just asked people, where are you starting from? Because I wanted to know, are people at 100 subscribers? Are they at 0 subscribers and they haven't even started? Are they at 100,000 subscribers? And this really helped me understand my audience so I can make videos that are useful to people. And that Google form that I had in the description, that gave me a ton of valuable insights. Now, the con here is that you have to have an audience to ask in order to do that. But the pro is you will get a ton of valuable insights and you'll know where people are starting and where they want to go. And this will help you in creating thumbnails and creating titles that actually resonate with people. All right, let's look at the next one here. I wanted to show you these two thumbnails. This one here got 10 million views. It's by Dude Perfect. And then this one here, 439,000 in only 2 months. And it's about simulating a river in a house. And this is, by the way, part 2 of the video. So that's an incredibly impressive view count. And if you can't tell, these two here are 100% AI made. I think this one's made by AI. I might be wrong. This one's definitely made by AI. Now, there's a very obvious pro to making thumbnails with AI. It's very quick. You just type what you want and then it gets made. That is incredibly useful. And as a graphic designer, yes, it's kind of annoying that AI can just make our thumbnail now in 2 seconds. But once you start seeing it as a tool instead of a competitor, it really is a phenomenal thing to use with thumbnail design. And especially if you're a small channel and you just don't have the money to invest in a thumbnail designer, then AI can be incredibly useful. The problem with this though is, you can get mixed results. They don't always end up great, and it doesn't always have a fantastic CTR. Dude Perfect talked about in an interview with, I believe it was with John, they said that this here outperformed all the ones that they designed, which I found really interesting. But that won't obviously always be the case. Sometimes, someone will see an AI generated thumbnail and think this is going to be some AI video. It's not going to be personable and it might be low effort. That's just an assumption that you could have when you see a clearly AI generated thumbnail. All right, the next one here is one of my favorites. So this here is from the Diary of a CEO podcast. You can see this thumbnail, this one, this one. This here is the ABC test that he did. Then we have this one here by Colin and Samir. We can see TikTok hurt us, but TikTok hurt us, and the man who runs Instagram. This was an ABC test by Colin and Samir here for this video. By the way, I'll let you guess which one here won the ABC test. So in the video, they interview the head of Instagram. And one thing to remember is with YouTube Studio's ABC thumbnail test, the thing they are looking at is not CTR, but it is watch time. And one of the best ways for you to increase your average view duration with your thumbnails is to ensure that your thumbnail is accurately representing what the video premise is. And the premise of this video is they sit down and they talk to the head of Instagram, the person who runs Instagram. And as this one here is about TikTok and this one here is about TikTok, these two aren't doing as good of a job of accurately representing what the video is about. The video is about the man who runs Instagram. So the winner for this was this thumbnail here. So hopefully this ABC test here shows you that making a thumbnail that accurately represents the video is really, really important. Now, the pro of doing an ABC quote test here is it's incredibly easy to do. You just have a photo of the person you're interviewing, or maybe of you, and then you test out 3 different quotes. This is incredibly easy to produce, and you can do this in, a matter of minutes, or even seconds, to be honest. The problem here is you need to find a quote that's genuinely interesting, or you need to have a video premise that's genuinely interesting. For example, listening to the head of Instagram, that's very interesting. Or learning how to turn $0 into $10,000 per month, that is very interesting. So if you don't have appealing quotes or premises for this thumbnail, then you are not going to get a high click-through rate. But let's say you don't say anything that's wildly interesting in your interview or in your talking head video, and you just pick a quote out of thin air, then what will happen is you'll have a potentially high click-through rate because, people are clicking on some outlandish quote, but then when they get to the video, they realize that's not what this is about, and your average view duration will decrease. So the pro here is that it's incredibly easy to make, but the con of this is you have to actually be saying something interesting or talking to someone interesting for this to work. Otherwise, it's just an incredibly boring looking thumbnail. But remember these flashy tactics that we hear about, like add a red background and add a drop shadow and add rainbow colors and add fire in the background and all of this stuff. Yes, you might slightly increase your CTR, but your average view duration will be terrible if your video doesn't live up to that thumbnail. So it's about finding that right balance. But this thumbnail format here is one of my favorites. By the way, you can actually get this layout here for free in my thumbnail layout pack. It's completely free. It's linked in the description if you want it. All right, this here is the next thumbnail format. This works again for any niche, entertainment or education. It's just a fantastic thumbnail format. It's pretty obvious what the thumbnail format is. So here you can see WOP does it. We can see Ryan Trahan's done it a few times. Here's another example, Jay Millie Disc Golf. Love this channel. He does this a lot as well, and it's very obvious. This is the message. Now the pro for the message format is that you get to leverage famous people or famous brands in your thumbnail. So for people who like disc golf and watch that kind of content, they'll recognize these brands here, the Disc Golf Pro Tour, Innova Discs, and then here obviously Starbucks and a bunch of celebs that we all recognize. So this is a thumbnail that's easy then to leverage famous brands and famous people. And if you're a small YouTuber, this can be incredibly useful to do, because at this stage, no one is clicking on the thumbnail because they recognize you. You're a small YouTuber, they don't know who you are, but they will recognize Drake or Taylor Swift, for example. So if Ryan Trahan's doing it, and he's quite a famous person at this point, if he's doing it with Taylor Swift, then you can definitely do it as a small YouTuber. So the pro is you get to leverage other brands and famous people. But the con here is people are probably clicking because of that celebrity or because of that brand. So they most likely want to see that person or that brand involved in the video. So you might have a bit more work in the first 30 seconds here in convincing them to stay. Because, you know, if I'm clicking to see Taylor Swift, for example, go to Ryan Trahan's birthday party, then if I don't immediately see Taylor Swift or immediately see Drake or Starbucks, then there's just going to be a lot more work in convincing me to stay. So again, your CTR might increase by doing this, which is a pro, but the con is your average view duration might take a hit because I'm clicking to see, you know, insert celebrity, and if they're not there, I'm disappointed, so I leave. So in other words, just make sure that you're living up to whatever you're doing in the thumbnail. If you say you message this specific person, then just make sure that you actually message them and that they're actually coming up in the video. All right, here's the next example. It's not a rule of thumb video if I don't bring up Alex Hormozi. He does this thumbnail, this thumbnail, this thumbnail, this thumbnail, and he has a bunch of others. You've probably caught on to what the format is. It is the blueprint. This here is one of the best formats that you can do, again, if you're an educational content creator. Because if you have knowledge and you are laying it out as a blueprint, then that is very appealing to me. Because if I want to learn something, and let's say you're teaching me how to do photography, for example. If there's a video which is 5 tips on how to get better at photography versus a video which is give me 1 hour and I'll teach you everything you need to know about photography, the 1 hour blueprint is going to be a lot more appealing to me because I know you're going to have step-by-step everything that I need to know. You are going to have the full guide. You're going to have the full path. You're going to show me how to start from zero in photography. That is very, very appealing, especially for beginners. But bear in mind, this doesn't just have to work for beginners. You know, this could work for, let's say you're helping pro athletes to sign more brand deals. That's a very specific example, but if you can genuinely teach someone how to go from signing 1 brand deal per month to signing 10, then that's an extremely useful video. So the pro with that is if you're selling something, then I'm probably going to be quite likely to want to buy from you, or at least likely to click onto your sales page. Because if this thumbnail lives up to the actual video and you're genuinely teaching me step by step how to do something, then I'm going to want to work with you because you're genuinely providing the value that you said you would from the thumbnail. But the con with this is that you actually need to know what you're talking about. Because if I click onto a thumbnail that's a blueprint and you don't provide a blueprint, you don't genuinely provide a step by step on how to do something, then I'm going to be really let down. If you say that this is a blueprint and then you say tip 1 on camera photography, buy a good SD card, then I'm going to feel really let down. That's not a genuine step-by-step blueprint. So the big problem with these blueprints is you genuinely have to have a good step-by-step formula in doing something. You have to provide that in a very concise formula. Otherwise, that thumbnail is just clickbait and not useful to me. Speaking of, cheeky plug, if you want my proven blueprints, then click the link in the description. I have a full bundle which includes my title masterclass. There are 4 main ingredients that you have to have in every single title in order for it to go viral or for it to even perform decently. And you might be using 1 or 2 of them by accident, but you really want all 4 for it to be an effective title. There's also 4 ingredients that make up an effective thumbnail. No, it's not increased saturation and increased contrast or any of that generic thumbnail advice. There are 4 things that you need to have in a thumbnail for people to click. And the more of those ingredients you have, the more likely people are to click. It also includes my full design process blueprint. There are 5-step, it's called the craft process that I came up with, CRAFT. And this is the exact step-by-step process that you can go through whenever you're designing a thumbnail. And the 3rd step in that process is arrangement, and that's how you are arranging your thumbnail, which is how I'm helping you in this video, trying to find a format that works for you. But there are 2 steps before you get to the actual layout that are absolutely crucial for you to get the click. It also includes a bunch of downloadable resources, and it includes my thumbnail design checklist, which you can go through before you upload any thumbnail to ensure that it's actually going to perform. There's a link in the description to this full bundle. All right, let's look at the next thumbnail format. Now, this is kind of like the blueprint, but it's slightly different. As you can see here, this is a 1 hour and 30-minute video, a 1 hour video, 1 hour and 40-minute video. And as you can see here, the word is masterclass, masterclass, and course. Here's another example from Davey, one of my favorite entrepreneurs. You can see 2024 free course for beginners, which is a 34-minute video. And this one here, 3 hour and 5-minute video, Shopify tutorial for beginners. And then another example to go back to the Simon Squibb example, $0 to 1 million, 11 million views. And that is a 2 hour and 30-minute video. And what this is the masterclass. Now, typically, not always, but these masterclasses are often not directly in what they're selling. So they don't typically compete in whatever their product is. And the difference with blueprints, from what I found, is blueprints are typically a small part in whatever they're selling or teaching, whereas masterclasses are typically in an adjacent field. So for example, if I were to make a masterclass, instead of making it about thumbnail design, I might make it about how to write an intro, or it might be a masterclass on editing. So it's something that's adjacent to whatever you're selling. And the pro with masterclasses is it is phenomenal in getting leads. Leads, if you don't know, just means potential customers. Because if you have a full masterclass on something and I'm really impressed by it and I find it really useful, then I'm going to like you and be more likely to buy whatever the thing that you're selling is. And the more closely that these 2 things are related, the more likely that I am to purchase. So let's say, as an example, we use the book writing example from before. So you teach people how to write a book and you have templates and stuff like that. You could do a masterclass on something similar. So how to publish your first ebook online. And you do the full step-by-step process on doing that. Now, for me to publish that book, I still have to, write the book. So I still need to do this thing here. But if you're helping me with this and you're giving me the full masterclass on how to publish the book, then I'm really going to trust you in helping me in writing the book. And that's what makes the masterclass such a fantastic lead generation video. But the problem here is you now have to learn this adjacent skill. So for example, I'm not an expert in editing. I'm not an expert in filming. As you can tell, this is a Google slide presentation. So now for me to make an editing masterclass, I now not only have to be an expert in thumbnails, but now I have to go and learn how to do editing. And then I have to learn how to present that editing to you in a really tight and concise and useful masterclass. So the obvious problem here is that's a lot of work. And that's what holds people back from making masterclasses. But if you do, and the desire and the topic is very similar to whatever you're selling, you're going to have a fantastic lead generation source. All right, let's look at this next example here. Again, it is not a rule of thumb video if I don't talk about Ryan Trahan. So we have this video here, this one here, this one here, this one here. You've probably picked up on the theme. Here's another example from Cal Freezy. We have this one here and this one here. 1.6 million views. I tested the worst rated restaurants. This thumbnail here is absolutely phenomenal. And then we have this one here, which is a 1-star restaurant. And then we have this one here, which is a 5-star restaurant. So if you haven't picked up on it, it is the review. Now, if you haven't done a review video, this is a really easy video to make if you're doing a 1-star review, because something that's a 1-star probably won't cost that much. And people find it really interesting to watch something that is 1-star, and people find it interesting to watch something that's 5-star. If you do a 3-star video, it probably won't do that well, because why would I watch something that's just completely fine? So the pro with this thumbnail is it's very easy for me to understand. If I see a 1 star in the thumbnail, I immediately understand what the premise is. I see 1 star and I see burger, cool, I understand this is bad food. Or if I see 1 star and a cruise, cool, this is a really bad cruise. So the pro here is the thumbnail is very efficient in getting across the premise of the video. Another pro is it's just very cheap to make. If you're doing a 1-star review, it's going to be a lot cheaper than doing a 5-star review. Now, the con here is it will probably cost you. You probably have to buy something. For it to have a review, it probably will cost. But obviously, that's not always the case. You can get creative with it. So let's say you teach soccer, for example, and you find a forum of 100 different ways of kicking the ball. I don't play soccer, as you can tell. And that list there has a ranking, and let's say a few of those soccer skills rank 1 star. Well, it would be free for you to obviously try out those soccer skills that are ranked 1 star. So you can get creative with it, but most of the time you're going to be reviewing stuff that costs, which means there is an upfront investment. All right, let's talk about this next thumbnail format here, which every single channel has used. Here's 3 examples from Sabri Subi, who's an Australian entrepreneur. 800,000 views, 100,000 views, 54,000 views. Then we have some thumbnails here by Mark, 2.1 million views, 3.9 million views. And then obviously I'm going to bring up Alex Hormozi again, 3 million views, 2.9, 2.5. If you haven't picked up on what it is the tweet. Now, the pro here is it is very, very easy to make this tweet thumbnail. You just have to draw a box and then have a photo of you and then write some text in it. You could make this thumbnail in probably like 30 seconds. Now, there are 2 problems with this. A, it's not that very interesting of a thumbnail, so you have to have something really interesting to say. If you don't have like a bold, captivating, by bold, I don't mean like a bold font, but like a really interesting, captivating sentence that you could have as your tweet, then people aren't going to click. So it needs to be something that just instantly captivates people when they hear it. And that can be quite difficult to do. The other problem is that let's say you come up with something that's really, really interesting and captivating, but then when they click on the video, it doesn't match the thumbnail. So let's say in the thumbnail, I have a tweet that says, you're going to fail as a YouTuber. And then when you click on the video, it doesn't match that kind of energy. And I'm actually talking about how great you're going to do with your YouTube channel. What could happen there is my average view duration will decrease because the video isn't living up to the expectations of the thumbnail. And that's why it's so important for you to write your title and make your thumbnail before you record your video. And this is especially true for this format here, because if you record your video and then after think, I might want to do this tweet format and then realize, oh, I actually don't say anything that's that interesting or, you know, that controversial or that bold or whatever in the video, especially in the first 30 seconds, then your average view duration will drop. And we don't want that. Your CTR and your AVD, we want to increase them. All right, this next one here is by a creator called Elliot, is a cool guy. And these thumbnails here are very different from the ones we've looked at before. This video here, by the way, I suck at logo design, so I made 1,000 in a day. This doesn't happen very often when I'm watching YouTube, but when I watched this video, I got angry purely from how good it was. If you're a graphic designer or a thumbnail designer, I recommend watching this video. And then here's another example. We have Danny Gonzalez up here and we have Drew Gooden down here. So you might have picked up here on the trend, and this is the chaos. So thumbnails that just look chaotic and like there's a lot going on. And as you can see here, these views are very impressive. 13 million views, 2.7, 2.7, 6.8. These thumbnails here are breaking the typical thumbnail design rules that you hear about. This one here has so many elements, so that shouldn't work according to typical thumbnail design rules, because you should keep it simple and only have one word and all of that stuff. Now, the pro here is it's very fun to make because, you know, you can be super creative and you can jam pack a bunch of stuff in there. But the con with this is it's very difficult to pull off where it's still easy to understand the premise of the video whilst still having so many moving elements. So this one is a really difficult balance here with being fun and chaotic and like having a lot of elements, whereas still being, you know, digestible. Because if you don't achieve both of these, then people just won't click on the thumbnail because they don't understand the premise of the video. All right, the last one here is this one. Breaking 90, break 75, bogey free, 3 aces. This is big wedge golf and foundation disc golf. Then here's another one from Dr. Mike Israetel. This video here is saying Natty, and this one here is about Ronnie. This one here says FSD, and this thumbnail here says dual, tri, and quad. Now, what these thumbnails here are doing is using an industry term, or they're talking about someone in the industry. Now, the pro with this is you're going to have a high average view duration, because for me to click on this thumbnail, I need to know who Ronnie is. Or for me to click on these, I need to understand what breaking 90 even means. So if I'm clicking on that thumbnail, then I'm going to stick around for a long time, because for me to click on it, I already have to have like a passion for that industry or for whatever topic you're talking about, because I'm not going to click on something that says break 75 if I don't know what that means. So these thumbnails will most likely have a very high average view duration because you're going to have your exact target audience clicking on it. But as you're hearing, the problem here is that maybe you're going to be discluding a lot of people because you already have to understand that industry term in order for me to click on it, or you already have to know this industry celebrity or industry person for me to click on this video. Because if I don't know who the person is, or if I don't understand the language that you're using in the thumbnail, then I'm not going to click on that video. So the pro is you'll have a high average view duration, but the con is your CTR will most likely suffer because if I don't know what that term means, I'm probably not going to click on that video. Again, if you want my full cheat sheet, it is linked in the description. That includes my title masterclass, my thumbnail design masterclass, my design process blueprint, a bunch of downloadable resources, and a thumbnail checklist before every single upload. It is linked in the description. If you found this video useful, you are going to absolutely love it. Now, if you found this useful, you might want to watch me design a thumbnail for a client from scratch. If so, click on this video here, and I even go through the results at the end of the video. Click on this here. Thanks for watching.